Legislator Robert Changulanyi, popularly known as Bobby Wine, and former Army General Henry Tumukunde, among other candidates who have declared interest to run against the incumbent President Yoweri Museveni. Well, let's discuss this in more detail now and bring in Godba Tumushabe, who is a policy and social analyst based in Uganda. We also have with us Gerald Kagambwire Kareija, who is also a political analyst and commentator in Ugandan politics. Gentlemen, many thanks for your time here on Bottomline Africa. Godba, let's begin with you. On the 16th of June, the Ugandan Electoral Commission announced that all political campaigns for the general election will be conducted mainly through TV, mainstream media and social media, occasioned by the spread of COVID-19. How practical is this, considering the dynamics of Ugandan politics?
Yeah, Michelle, let me, I think for our listeners, they need to understand more about the Ugandan context of elections. First of all, there is a presumption that the current group called NRM is a ruling party. Mm-hmm. But in a real sense, the Museveni group called NRM is actually the state itself. It has captured all institutions of state, whether they are security institutions, whether they are elections governing bodies, mm-hmm. whether they are institutions that manage the financing. And for President Museveni, he has been campaigning for the last 5 years. So when you come with an election that is going to be digital, you basically give the incumbent an overwhelming advantage, mm-hmm. And a very complicated landscape for newcomers and those who do not have the state infrastructure behind them. Mm-hmm. Because even the media landscape is so distorted to the extent that most media houses, especially radio stations across the country, are owned by Museveni sympathizers or his supporters. Mm-hmm. So that is the landscape that you are playing in, which is very, very distorted.
Right. Let me bring in Gerald just for a moment. Considering what Godba says, we've seen the FDC candidate Kizza Besigye now opting out of the 2021 general election. He did appear on a talk show on NTV last week where he said very blatantly, no election will ever remove President Yoweri Museveni from power. He went ahead to say that we do not need an election to get freedom. The strategy must be to prepare to fight for our country with or without an election. It was quite a long interview there, but what do you make of his comments?
My first observation is that you should also appreciate that Kizza Besigye was with President Yoweri Museveni in the bush. Mm-hmm. Their mental programming is fundamentally the same. They believe in fighting, they believe in resistance, they believe in persistent fight. So that's common amongst them. That's why they moved together. Mm-hmm. That aside, the President Yoweri Museveni currently is in a dominant position. And at the same time, the NRM, which is in power, is in many places enmeshed with the state. Mm-hmm. So it is not an easy task to have NRM out of power on the basis of elections, especially with a disaggregated and less coherent opposition.
Mm-hmm. Let's speak about that. And Goba, let me come to you about the state of the opposition. Without Kizza Besigye leading the FDC or carrying the FDC flag, we've seen Bobby Wine seemingly now carry the face of the opposition. But what is the state of the opposition in Uganda?
First of all, we need to understand what do we mean by opposition here. There are two types of opposition. One is that it's opposition that is organized around political parties. So these are politicians who are organized in political formations. When we did the survey that you referenced to, we found that only 57% of the population identify themselves as belonging or being affiliated to political parties. So that's when you talk about opposition in form of political formations, that's what you are talking about. But I think the biggest opposition to President Museveni is much bigger than the political position, because we have been seeing it, whether it's in the workers' movement, in civil society, in the teachers' movements, professional bodies. You see the different elements there, and to the extent that President Museveni is able to direct every effort around the political position, then he has an advantage. And to the extent that the political opposition remains disunited and scattered, then it is not able to attract the other elements of the opposition to Museveni's overstay in power. Because Museveni, the challenge to President Museveni is not so much because he's an incompetent leader. It is so much because he has overstayed in power. It is so much because all the policies of government right now are directed around his stay in power, and all the budget appropriations are around how to sustain Museveni's life presidency.
The bigger question there would be, what kind of election are we expecting in January 2021? Because like you say, all campaigning has been relegated to happening on the media. We've had opposition candidates say they have approached media houses and they found armies there beating and chasing their people away. And as it is, the leaders of these parties are going into these elections unchallenged because of COVID-19, there will be no political parties, there will be no delegates conferences as well. Are we looking at a fair election in January?
Now, I can say without any fear of contradiction that what we have is a fraudulent election. It's a fraudulent electoral process. Even right now, if you see the way Museveni's security forces, and you are talking about the former security forces and militia groups like the local defense units, they are all organized around stopping every other opposition politician from contesting. So you are talking about a fraudulent process that definitely cannot produce a free and fair election. Right. For the opposition forces, the most important thing is how do you use the electoral process to be able to organize in many other different forms.
All right, let's bring in Gerald. Gerald, in this election, we've had more than 30 presidential aspirants already clearly determined to oust President Yoweri Museveni. But all that has been said, having electioneering on media, on social media, on TV, and the power that the incumbent president holds even over the institutions, what are you expecting in January?
It's going to be, in terms of the results, it will be the same as it has been before. You cannot expect anything different, given the conditions. President Yoweri Museveni will win the election because of the prevailing conditions. They favor him. On top of that, we have the opposition, which, in my view, would make better performance if it was coalesced together than scattered as it is now.
Right.
So the opposition has become weaker than become stronger. There were opportunities for the opposition, but they are dwindling. Also, the question of the so-called scientific or virtual campaigning. The voter intimacy, the voter behavior in Uganda is highly influenced by mass enthusiasm, processions, support. That is why you find that even leading ministers in cabinet have faulted or offended the COVID-19 procedures for political purposes. Because the population can only demonstrate its intimacy through such maneuvers. So if we are going to enforce the standard operating procedures as prescribed, without doubt, newcomers, the weak, those with the least face recognition, who most of them are in opposition, will not make it. But also there is another group. There is an opposition which thrives on hostile dependency. They win elections because they are seen to stand against, to fight for, or to to side with the forces of change. That is their currency. It will not change, especially in urban areas. So I do not see a significant configuration different from our previous election.
All right.
But that is at presidential level. At parliamentary level, the creation of new constituencies may increase on members of parliament for NRM because it has a privilege of resources, it has a privilege of association with the state, and it has a privilege of numbers.
Right. We don't have much time. Let's bring in Godber for the final comment. COVID-19 has been used as an excuse for many advice, from corruption and now, many saying, banning political campaigns could be a healthy decision, but largely could be a way to sabotage the opposition in Uganda. But how do we maintain and, leave democracy in its place in these times of COVID-19, especially in Uganda with the elections just 5 months away?
No, this could have been done much earlier because the pandemic was declared sometime in February. If government was committed to organize a free and fair election, there has been sufficient time to make all kinds of adjustments to be able to comply with certain requirements, such as social distancing, provision of sanitary materials. I mean, all this could have been there, but also if the government was committed, it could even say maybe there are no public rallies and processions because of the difficulties to manage, to apply standard operating procedures, but there would be town hall meetings because you can do meetings of many people. Even now they are doing them, but leave alone that. You understand the fraud that the government is trying to manage by the fact that all the government ministers and politicians allied to President Museveni, they are all allowed to organize rallies and public gatherings, and when an opposition politician tries that, then the gatherings are broken up by police using tear gas and all kinds of violence. So in other words, I would say, and I would want to probably just chip in what Gerard said, that President Museveni will win. In my view, that in Uganda, President Museveni is simply declared winner. He doesn't even have to win. The entire infrastructure of state is organized to declare him winner, whether he wins or not.
All right, Gerald, let's have your final comment. I mean, that is not how democracy should work. That being said, what can other African countries, regional institutions, the African Union, and international observers do to intervene in the situation?
First of all, they need to pronounce themselves on what is already taking place so that we know the mind of the those organizations, the African Union, East African Community. But you will not expect much to come from outside than from inside. I think there are a number of presentations that have been made within the Ugandan polity. We are seeing new issues coming out, members of parliament calling for an extension. Much as we are already in an electoral period, I think there is need to sit back and listen to the voices that are saying this will not work as we expect it to do.
All right, gentlemen, many thanks for your time. That is Gerald Kareija, who is a political analyst and commentator in Uganda. We've also been speaking live to Godber Tumushabe, a policy and social analyst, also based in Uganda, as Ugandan elections and campaigns begin just 5 months away.